Today we are going to be reading chapter 9 of Aliens Ate My Homework. So here are the questions. Number 1, what do you infer about Rod's parents and where his dad is? Number 2, describe the aliens' plan to track BKR. Number 3, what do you predict they will discover at BKR's house? Okay, so listen, think about those questions as I'm reading chapter 9 called House Hunting. Well, said Mom with a frown, is this the toy that caused all the trouble today? I looked at her in surprise. How did you hear about that? Ms. Maloney called me. Arnie Markle broke his hand today. His father is threatening a lawsuit. Arnie broke his hand trying to punch me, I cried. If I hadn't ducked, he might have broken my nose instead of his hand. My mother sighed. I know, sweetheart. The thing is, we can't afford any trouble with them. I sighed too. Ever since my father left, we've been tight for money, especially since he doesn't send any support. Sometimes it's hard not to hate him for that. Mom looked at Gracker. Maybe if you just gave him this toy. I can't do that, I shouted. She blinked, surprised at my reaction. It would be wrong, I said desperately, like paying them off or something. To my astonishment, she began to blush. You're right, honey, I'm sorry. That was a bad idea. But I really don't know what I'm going to do if they actually sue. We just can't afford a lawyer right now. Can they really sue us? I asked. I didn't do anything wrong, honest. People can sue over almost anything. I don't think the Markles would win, but they can afford it and we can't. Arnie's dad knows that. This is his way of pushing us around. Geez, he's no better than his kid. That's the way it goes sometimes, said Mom. She tossed Gracker onto the bed. Don't leave these lying around, all right? She left the room. I could tell that she was trying not to cry. I don't know who I hated more at that moment, Arnie, his father, or my own father who had left us in a situation where Arnie and his parents could cause us so much trouble. Ouch, said Gracker, straightening himself out. That hurt. What am I going to do? I asked. Don't worry about it, he said, dusting himself off and flying back to the desk. What do you mean? Why shouldn't I worry about it? You don't have to face Arnie tomorrow. You have to skip school so you can take us to BKR's house, remember? What a terrific solution, I said with a groan, flopping onto my bed. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if being taken to Alpha Centauri to stand trial might be the best way out of this mess. At some point, I fell into a sleep that was marked by wild nightmares. Given the state of my life at the moment, it wasn't much different from being awake. Despite my hopes, my troubles did not magically disappear overnight. On the other hand, they didn't get any bigger either. They were still 2 inches tall. A new thought occurred to me as I was getting dressed. You know, I said to Gracker, who was standing on my dresser, examining a monster trading card that looked as if it might be a portrait of one of his relatives. Even if I wanted to skip school, there's no way I could do it. Why not? He asked, setting down the card. Well, when I leave the house, my mother will be watching, so I have to get on the bus. That takes me straight to school. When I get off at school, there'll be a teacher watching, so just when and how am I supposed to get away to take you to Billy Becker's house? Gracious, said Tar Gibbons, who was climbing out of the ship at that moment. You don't have much time to yourself. Don't they trust you? I thought about pointing out that I had had a lot more time to myself before the Fergal crashed through my window, but I decided against it. Do you have any other way of getting to school? Asked Gracker. I hesitated. If only I could lie. Well, asked Gracker. I sighed. I might be able to talk my mother into letting me ride my bike. We had been talking about me riding to school for some time now. Mom had been resisting because it's so far, but I could tell she was going to relent soon. Make it happen, said Gracker. I sighed again and went to breakfast. My mother was looking pretty grim. I'm sorry about last night, Rod, she said. I knew at once that I had her. She was in the grip of a guilt attack, and it was going to be easy to talk her into letting me ride the bike. Of course, once she found out that I had used the occasion to skip school, It would probably be 10 years before she let me ride there on my own again. After breakfast, I said goodbye to the things, then climbed onto my bike and pedaled out of the driveway, supposedly heading for school. I had 3 aliens in my backpack. Tar Gibbons and Phil had again stayed home to work on the ship. A totally different destination in mind and a load of guilt like you wouldn't believe. It was a gorgeous spring morning, warm enough that I didn't need a jacket. About a half mile from the house, I stopped to ask if the aliens wanted to ride where they could see. Cracker and Snout opted for my front pocket, Madame Pong for my shoulder. I was worried that she might fall off. When she assured me that she could manage it safely, even if she did, I was worried she might fall off. When she assured me that she could manage it safely, even if she did, I remembered that she was wearing a rocket belt. The leaves were just budding out and the air smelled sweet and fresh. Except for when we passed McGuire's chicken farm, they had just cleaned a winter's worth of manure out of the barns and the smell was overwhelming. "What an aroma!" cried Snout, sounding almost joyous. "It makes me think of home." "I guess life is different everywhere you go." "Rod," said Madame Pong, speaking directly to my ear, "I know we are making your life difficult. I will try to see that you are rewarded if we survive the mission." "If?" I yelped. I stopped pedaling, but since we were going downhill, we kept moving. "I thought we had made it clear that this was a very dangerous mission," she said. "Then why are you dragging me into this? I'm just a kid." "Does that exempt you from doing what is necessary?" she asked, sounding puzzled. "On this planet, we save stuff like that for grown-ups. We try to protect kids." Madame Pong was silent for a moment. Finally, she said, "I don't understand. If you try to protect children, why do you let them live where people are shooting at each other all the time?" I thought about some of the things I had seen on the evening news and decided maybe our society wasn't as serious about protecting kids as it likes to pretend, which left me with nothing to say to Madame Pong and no excuse for not going to BKR's house. I knew where Billy Becker lived because once, when several of us had stayed late for a special project, his father had given me a ride home. He had pointed out the house as we drove past it. Remembering that ride now, I shivered. I had been driven home by an interstellar criminal. The Becker house was on the outskirts of town. That made sense, given the fact that it was a criminal hideout, but it worked for our purposes too. If the house had been in town, I probably would have been stopped by someone wanting to know why I wasn't in school before I could have gotten anywhere near it. Even out of town, I figured we would have better luck if we waited for the morning traffic to die down. So I pulled off the road and hid in a copse of trees beside a little stream. I sat down on a rock. Cracker, Madame Pong, and Snout used their rocket belts to float down to the bank of the stream. Cracker began to pace back and forth at the edge of the water, his green brow furrowed in concentration. "How much longer do you think we need to wait?" he asked after about a minute. He reminded me of the things, asking, "How much farther is it?" when we were in the car. "Probably another half hour," I said. "By that time, most people will have made it to work." He began to pace again. Suddenly, he shouted in surprise as he came face to face with a frog. He pulled out his ray gun, but the frog jumped into the water before he could shoot. Cracker wrinkled his nose. I tried not to laugh. "What are you going to do when we get there?" I asked. "It depends on whether there is anyone inside," said Snout. "How are you going to know that without going and asking?" "I'll use certain mental techniques to perform a bioscan. This will tell me if there are any large masses of living matter inside. If BKR has left the house for some reason, for example, if he has a job to help maintain his disguise, we can just go inside." "Don't we have to have a search warrant or something? We have laws against breaking into people's houses, you know, even criminals' houses." "BKR is not a citizen of your planet and therefore is not subject to your law," said Cracker. I wasn't sure that covered the situation, but not being a lawyer, I didn't figure I could argue the matter, so I changed the subject. "What about Mrs. Becker?" "If she is home, you will talk to her in order to distract her while we slip inside." Talk to her about what? Make something up, snapped Cracker. I can't. I don't tell lies. Then think of something true. Well, that was a lot of help. In the end, I didn't have to worry about it. Snout's bioscan showed no one home. Good, said Cracker. We can all go inside. All of us? That's what I said. I rode my bike up to the Beckers' front door. Being out of town, there were not a lot of other houses around, just 3. In fact, from which we could be seen at all. Snout did another bioscan, checking on the neighbors. 2 of the houses were empty. Taking a chance that no one was watching from the 3rd, we rode around back so I could hide the bike. The yard was neat and trim. Snout took out another device and used it to do a tech scan. This was a lot like the bioscan, only now he was looking for any kind of device that would sound an alert if someone entered the house. Any doubts I had about whether there was really an alien in residence here faded when Snout announced that he had found 4 monitoring systems. I might have been able to convince myself that one system was a burglar alarm. Rare, but not impossible. But no one around here has 4 burglar alarms. After a few minutes of fiddling with the tech scan control box, Snout said, I have disabled the systems. It is now safe to enter the building. The aliens directed me to carry them to the back door. I held out my hand like a platform so Snout could stand on it. He took yet another device from his cloak and did something to the lock. The doorknob turned by itself. The door swung open. With the aliens riding on my shoulder, I entered BKR's lair. I moved slowly, carefully, expecting something to spring out at me at any second. But the house was almost disappointingly normal. Normal kitchen, normal bathroom, normal living room. It wasn't until Cracker told me to open the hall closet that I began to scream. So that's next chapter is chapter 10, The Real Enemy. And I'm not even going to show you what it looks like. Okay, so let's look at our questions. Number 1, what do you infer about Rod's parents and where his dad is? Number 2, describe the aliens' plan to track BKR. And number 3, what do you predict they will discover at BKR's house? Okay, join me for chapter 10 on Monday.